Hey guys, Jonathan here from the i5 podcast team. I hope you had a good new year. We're going to go straight into the new year with the latest development in the Michelle Mone story. We're going to start with a tweet that she made New Year's Eve. There have now been many weeks of continued press coverage involving the PPE MedPro story. My husband Doug will issue a statement tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to set the record straight. This is like the 12th time she's tried to do this. She did that BBC interview, which turned out to be a car crash. She then went to accuse the BBC of editing the footage. I mean, of course they did. They had to show highlights, but even the full thing is pretty damning. They couldn't really convince the public that they're not guilty of what they're being accused of. After this, of course, there have been many tweets, which I was going to do a video of. I was going to do a video about them in the new year, but they've dropped this tweet, so I've had to rush into responding to this statement that they've just released. So I'm just going to get straight into responding to this statement that they've made. You know, this is like the 12th attempt they've made to clear their name. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to choose some of the highlights of it. My family and I have been treated as a punching bag by the media for the past 3 years. We have received death threats and a constant torrent of online and other abuse. This cannot continue, and the British public need to know the facts. I mean, you say you've been treated as a punch bag by the press. I would say that you've been held to account by the press, and to be honest, a lot of it has been quite soft-balled, especially from the BBC. Though I notice how some of the left-wing outlets were a bit harsher with you, but to be honest, it's not so much, it's not so much using you as a punching bag, but more akin to, holding you to account, as the press are supposed to do. Here's the thing. When you start threatening the press with legal action to silence them, they're not going to take too kindly to that. It should also be aware that you were accused a few weeks ago of actually paying the Telegraph to pump out a Telegraph article defending you. So not all of the press has been having a go at you. As for online abuse, I mean, welcome to the internet. I'm not condoning it. No one deserves online abuse. But from what I can tell from a lot of the tweets, while yes, some are abusive, not condoning it, a lot of the tweets are also people simply just calling you out and asking you to pay the money back. So I'm not sure this interpretation stands up. Again, I'm not condoning online abuse. Also, don't most people say punching bag instead of punch bag? I used to do MMA, we always used to say punching bag. I mean, your husband's shirt didn't really fit him, so that maybe explains why, using terminology like a punching bag might be a bit alien to him. MedPro supplied PPE to the UK government at competitive prices and following a transparent process. Our pricing was so competitive that we saved the UK government at least 100 million compared to the competition at the time. 210 million type 11R masks were delivered and used in full, and 25 million gowns were made to specification and delivered on time. These goods were provided when the UK government desperately needed to find PPE in high volumes and at short notice. So the first thing, in reference to our pricing was so competitive that we saved the UK government at least 100 million compared to the competition at the time. It doesn't matter how much money you saved, the government, it doesn't matter how cheap it was, you sold faulty PPE that couldn't be used, and you took a kickback from the profits. That doesn't distract from the fact that you sold faulty PPE, and you didn't declare your association with this company, in the correct channels. And it also doesn't change the fact that you lied to the press about it and threatened everyone with legal action if they reported it. That doesn't change any of that. This is already turning into trying to change the narrative in the story. It's completely ignoring the fact so far that none of this PPE was actually suitable for use by NHS staff. The government ultimately rejected all of this PPE because it was not suitable. That was the end result when they got a hold of all of this stuff physically. They rejected it. And money was wasted on it as a result. Money that you profiteered from. Another highlight, MedPro's work was no different to any of the 51 other suppliers through what became known as the high priority lane. Value of the 115 contracts through the HPL, 3.8 billion, comprised of government ministers, MPs, peers, senior civil servants, and DHSC officials. In total, 394 contracts to a value of 7.9 billion were given to new PPE suppliers. In essence, it wasn't just us, with, again, no admission of them themselves doing something wrong. I fully appreciate and I believe them that they were not the only ones doing this. This VIP lane was infamous. Everybody else should be investigated the same way they have been. Everyone else should be exposed the same way they have been. No one is disputing that. This doesn't change the fact that these two should still be investigated for what they've done. And they should either give the money back or potentially face prison charges. What's happening to them in terms of accountability by the press and in terms of legal investigation. I'm not getting into online abuse and harassment, that's not called for, but in terms of the legal penalization of what they've done, they deserve all of this. This should be exposed. So I don't agree with everyone else did it, therefore we should get away with it. No, not at all. They're being singled out, I agree. And I think there is some truth, again, that the emphasis is being put on them, but they should still get penalized along with everyone else who was involved. What I think the majority of the population would like to see is these two give the money back or face legal consequences, in addition to the other people as well who profiteered from this getting exposed and being dealt with in the same way. To continue with the statement. The government paid for MedPro masks and gowns only once they were satisfied with the product. MedPro received no upfront deposits from the government, unlike 298 other suppliers. Again, those suppliers should be looked at in addition to you. To the tune of $2.5 billion, we funded all our own working capital and took the ultimate risk on behalf of the UK government. Where to start with that one? So looking at the last point first, we took the risks. Yeah, you took the risks, alright. You broke the law and did something immoral. And the risk was, you get caught, which you have been. Again, other people did the same, they should be caught as well, and they should get the same. The British government being satisfied with this stuff in the preliminary stage is something else that should be investigated. That is something that should be investigated. They're basically saying, look, we took advantage of this system that allowed us to profiteer this fast lane. That there were other things involved in this fast lane that allowed us to make a lot of money. Okay, those things should be looked at as well. But you still sold this faulty equipment that wasn't suitable. You put this faulty equipment to the government, and they approved it. The government at the time should be investigated. The people involved should be investigated for approving this and actually making the purchase. I fully agree with you. That doesn't change the fact that you're at fault for providing it in the first place. It seems like PPE MedPro absolutely cut corners with this stuff. Again, because none of it was functional. It all comes back to that. The system that allowed you to make money from this is corrupt, but it doesn't change the fact that you yourselves profiteered from selling non-functional PPE. It wasn't just you. Point taken, we believe you. But you should still be penalized for this, in addition to others. If you really cared so much about the system being corrupt, why don't you go into way more detail about the people who were involved and give more names? Why don't you do that? As for we put in all of our own capital, we funded it with all of our own capital, great. Okay, you again funded faulty PPE and let a conglomerate to work with a company that was founded 5 days before it was incorporated. You used your own money to profiteer. You used your own money to invest in the product that would result in you profiteering from the pandemic. You used your own money to develop faulty PPE that wasn't going to work and then made money from it. I'm not sure why that makes you look good. How on earth? So looking at the statement so far, I really am wondering how this PR statement got past their PR team. Like, who looks at these documents? Do they even have a PR team at this point? Who is looking at these documents and saying, yeah, we'll give that the go code? Who is greenlighting these statements? Aside from, obviously, Michelle Mone and her husband, obviously. Again, I'm sorry I can't do the whole statement right now. I may do a more detailed video doing the whole statement. I'm just going to do a few more of it. A few more pieces of it, rather. So there's one statement here. The stark reality is that the DHSC has brought this claim against MedPro at a time of increased scrutiny of how it overspent by so much, and when questions were being asked as to why the government was writing off £9 billion of PPE out of the £13.1 billion spent. How on earth did the UK government manage to purchase 5 years of PPE, next page, when it was only supposed to build up 4 months of stock? Yet no one has been held accountable at DHSC. Its head, Sir Chris Wormwold, permanent secretary to the DHSC, should resign, since ultimately he signed off all the PPE contracts. So there's some details which I think they need to give to the public. That's probably the tip of the iceberg of the details they know. It doesn't change the fact that they're guilty of sin and should be forced to pay back all that money and should maybe face legal action. It doesn't change any of that. But I'm happy they're starting to release details like that, and they're starting to expose the government system as a whole. They're doing it to distract from themselves. I fully appreciate that. But in this climate, sometimes this is the best you can get. when the Tories start turning on each other, that's when some of it gets exposed. The only sad thing is they're not revealing the full picture, because I think at this point Michelle Mone still wants to stay in the House of Lords and she doesn't want to leave it. So they're probably right in that aspect, but again, it doesn't change the fact that they should also be held accountable for what they've done. Going back to their statement. So rather than focus on the real story here, it suits the agenda of the government and their media spin doctors to scapegoat my wife and I for their own lamentable failures. Yeah, they said this in the BBC interview with Laura Koonsberg as well, and again, I agree with them. They are being used as a distraction from the system as a whole. I'm not disputing that. Not to sound like a broken record, they themselves should be held accountable along with everyone else involved. It doesn't save them. I wonder who this statement is for. Because of that small detail of mentioning that secretary's name, I wonder if this is a warning shot to the government to maybe ease on them a little bit and maybe silence the press on them a bit. Or they'll release and expose more details. I wonder if that's who this statement is aimed at. It's a warning shot to the government, rather than trying to turn the public over to them. I mean, Michelle Mone is apparently a sociopath with the way that she tries to control her image, so it wouldn't surprise me. But I am wondering, because this is a statement from the husband. Going back to their statement. I understand why the British public feel angry, but their agenda should not be directed of Michelle or I. That should be at Michelle or I. Yes, MedPro made a profit, which was in line with the margins made by other providers of PPE. Yes, Michelle was involved in introducing MedPro to the Cabinet Office. After all, Michelle had 25 years' experience in sourcing and manufacturing of mass-produced goods and knew firsthand the logistical challenges of sourcing, supplying, and delivering large amounts of products at short notice. I mean, so far they're doing a grand job of maintaining their innocence again in this interview. He's more or less just said that she was fully qualified on, and rather had the experience on how to profiteer in these circumstances of short supply. she knew how to get this. She knew how to mass produce faulty equipment that could be made in short time and then get it over to the UK post haste, so she could rob them of 200 million. I'm not sure that makes her look like a saint here. There are over 1,000 communications with the government to show this, despite the lies of the DHSC, that they were not aware of Michelle's involvement. Really? That simply doesn't stack. Equally, the Cabinet Office knew of my involvement and that we were a married couple. There was full transparency on what goods were being provided, the source of those goods, and the pricing. They bypassed the Freedom of Information Act was the big one. They made government contacts, I'm sure, but a lot of this was done on private emails. For example, with Michael Gove. And that bypassed the Freedom of Information Act. That was one of the things that broke the law during this. One of the many things. They deliberately kept this, they tried to conceal this as much as possible and keep it out of the public eye, because they knew how damaging this would be to their image. Lobbying and this kind of thing, like the fast lane, is rife in government, even without the pandemic as a backdrop. It's always gone on, and to be honest, an absurd amount of this immoral behavior is legal. But you can look it up. Or most of it you can look up. That's what they didn't want. That's why they didn't tell the right connections. That's why they didn't tell the right departments. Just to make my opinion clear as well, none of lobbying in general shouldn't be legal. None of this should be legal, because of the conflict of interest that it represents. They wanted to do all of this and maintain their public image. All of it should be illegal anyway. There's also repetition here. Michelle and I are being hung out to dry to distract attention from government incompetence in how it handled PPE procurement. Again, no one's disputing that. At a time of national emergency, and more admission of what they did, MedPro supplied the government with 1.5% of PPE spend, 202 million against a total of 13.1 billion, and yet the media or government refuses to focus on any of the other 98.5% of PPE supplied. Well, I mean, if there's truth to that, I agree with him there. That there should be more investigation to all of the other companies that were involved in this and all of the other individuals. I fully agree with him on that one. But that doesn't change the fact that I don't think that doesn't change the fact that I think he should also be investigated, much of which was defective or never used, and or supplied in identical circumstances to the MedPro contracts. So yeah, it wasn't just them, it was other people. No one's ever disputed that. What I think people are hoping is because these two have been caught, it'll open the door for others to get caught. It's looking like that's not going to be the case. I mean, apparently there was a vaccination hedge fund in number 10 that involved Rishi Sunak, and it was also suspected that maybe some members of the press were involved in that one. Though those are just rumours, I don't know if there's any truth to that. That there were all kinds of rumours and actual proven things circulating around Westminster at this time. He seems to be the part that's trying to protect his wife's political career. Michelle was neither a shareholder, a director, nor a decision maker in the MedPro consortium that I led. He's repeating what he said in Laura Koonsberg there. Nor was she entitled to any remuneration. All PPE money earned by me was fully disclosed on my tax return, and like all my sources of income, was put into a trust for the benefit of my family. So this is the same trap they fell into in the BBC interview. I mean, I say trap. I mean, they pretty much gave it to Laura Koonsberg on a silver platter. Again, the trust it went into, Michelle Mone and her children were beneficiaries of that trust, along with his family. So she set up the whole thing. The money was in his name, so they worked together, she, using her position as a member of the House of Lords, to get this deal through. None of this changes that. They can keep on repeating these facts to try and set them as a narrative. I think they're used to having the last word, and their last word being final, and it not being challenged. They can keep on saying this, but it doesn't change any of that. It doesn't change the fact she used her connections illegally to get this through. It doesn't change the fact that it doesn't change the fact she used her connections to sell this faulty product and profiteer from it. A lot of other people did it again. That doesn't change the fact she also did it. It might have been in his name. It should be said, though, that stuff has come out about her interaction with PPE MedPro, and she was actually quite abusive and bullying and was a bit of a bully towards them to get the money out as quickly as possible. Also, things like, it's not my yacht. She still benefited from that. She was using that yacht to go to Spain and go shopping in Spain all the time. Like, she was infamous for using it. I'm sure it was a Spanish port where the Led by Donkeys team intercepted it and spray-painted pandemic profiteers on it. She did benefit from all this money. She's going to benefit from all of it. There's even more details coming out of a £3 million interest payment going into her Coots account in relation to all of this. So I think what the narrative they're trying to put forward here is that he's a businessman just doing what a businessman does, and his wife, who he said had all these skills earlier in the statement, had nothing to do with it, so there's no need for her political career to be jeopardized. Because, him having her in the House of Lords gives him a lot of access to the government. Or rather, gave him a lot of access to government at the time. They also make reference to this being investigated like 2 years after. There could be any number of reasons for that. The investigation services could have just been gathering up evidence. The people protecting her could no longer be in office, like Boris Johnson. There could be any number of reasons for that. If anything, that makes them look worse, because action should have been taken sooner. But I do concede that it may have taken a long time for the investigation services to actually gather up all the evidence on them. Even though, at the time, it should be said that the press did have information relating to the accounts at the time as well. Which is why she used gag orders on them, because the press did have quite a bit of evidence on her. Continuing on, we have explained the position on the BBC. Yeah, you did, and it backfired on you massively. I mean, you were quite accurate with what you said in relation to, her benefiting from the money that you repeatedly said. Sorry to disappoint everyone. You didn't. Everyone got the popcorn out and laughed. But Michelle and her kids were not entitled to any of that money. Well, they were, because you put it in a trust where they would ultimately benefit from it, and the yacht Michelle Mone did use quite a lot. She also took a lot of photos with it. How I choose to organise my personal financial affairs is not a matter of public debate. It is when you break the law, and it is when you profiteer from a pandemic. However, I will say this. As my wife, the ways in which I support Michelle financially or otherwise is entirely my decision. Yes. And when you profiteer from a pandemic and do immoral things, there are consequences for decisions like this. This dispute should be determined in the civil courts. It is not a criminal case. A lot of people would beg to differ, mate. And we should certainly not be judged guilty by the government or its media spin masters. This coming from you and your wife, who basically paid to have a Telegraph article, apparently paid to have a Telegraph article come in and defend her. Or its media spin masters, before there has been a full and fair presentation of the facts. Well, there has been a fair presentation of the facts. It started a year ago, 1 to 2 years ago. You tried to suppress those facts being presented in the media. So that statement doesn't really hold up, does it? Your legal team has tried to suppress a lot of the information. You've realized how damaging this was to your public image, and now national crime agencies are involved. You really are aware of how detrimental it is. And I think it's getting to the point where your lawyers and your legal team, rather, can't contain this. So this statement is just more of the same. More of them inadvertently showing how qualified they were to take advantage of the situations. She had the logistics skills and other experiences, knowing exactly what to do and how to not only how to mobilize manufacturing, but also logistically get the stock there. He himself had the money to fund it. That's just a small fraction of it. This statement really isn't going to help them. But like I said earlier in the video, I wonder who this is a statement for. Some of the details in there were very precise. And I wonder if this is a warning shot. I'm sorry I didn't have enough time to get I'm sorry I didn't have enough time to get a full response to the statement out. I've tried to do as much as I could in the time that I had available to get something out for the channel. Jim and I are probably going to do a video in a few weeks on this, where this statement and other things in relation to this case, like the tweets she made after the video, will be discussed in much greater detail. So I hope you at least found this entertaining and enlightening. Remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe. That kind of interaction really helps us out a lot. Don't hesitate to leave a comment. If you disagree, again, don't hesitate to leave a comment. Jim does love to argue. We hope you had a nice Christmas and we hope you have a good New Year. Or rather, when this video, well, obviously, now that it's New Year's Day, it's not New Year's Eve anymore, we hope that the New Year brings a lot of good for you. And we hope, if you're in a bad situation, we hope it gets a lot better. Have a good one, guys.